Hello and welcome to the Biological Anthropology lecture series. I'm Dr. Richard Jonathan O. Tadurin. Here we explore what it means to be human, biologically, evolutionarily, and behaviorally. Let's begin our journey into the science of humanity. Welcome to Module 10, The Origins of Modern Humans. In this module, we examine how Homo sapiens emerged, interacted with archaic humans, and spread across the globe. In earlier modules, we traced the rise of the genus Homo, from its small-bodied, stone tool-using beginnings to the global wanderer that Homo erectus became. Now we arrive at a turning point, the appearance of beings who look and behave recognizably like us. In this section, we examine major models of modern human origins, including out-of-Africa, multi-regionalism, and assimilation. Scientists have proposed different frameworks to explain how modern humans arose and how they relate to the other hominin groups living at the time. Let's revisit what the out-of-Africa or replacement model proposes. At its core, it suggests that anatomically modern humans evolved in Africa and later dispersed into Eurasia, replacing the archaic populations they encountered with little or no interbreeding. When you visualize this model, imagine a single expanding wave of Homo sapiens moving outward and gradually taking the place of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other regional groups. Let's look at why this model gained such strong early support. Fossils of early modern humans in Africa, like those from Homo and Herto, are significantly older than the earliest modern-looking fossils outside the continent. This establishes Africa as the likely cradle of our species. Genetic evidence reinforces this pattern. Mitochondrial DNA studies show the deepest lineages in African populations, suggesting that all living humans share a relatively recent common ancestor based in Africa. You might wonder why this matters. It tells us that the greatest genetic diversity, and therefore the longest evolutionary continuity, is found in Africa. The replacement model was developed before scientists had access to ancient genomes. At the time, the absence of obvious signs of admixture led researchers to conclude that modern humans simply outcompeted or displaced archaic groups. In this view, Neanderthals and others contributed little to nothing to the gene pool of today's populations. This idea shaped decades of thinking about human evolution. But as we'll see in the next subsections, the story becomes more complicated once ancient DNA enters the picture. Evidence of interbreeding with Neanderthals and Denisovans challenges the strict replacement aspect of the model. Still, the central premise that modern humans originated in Africa and expanded outward remains a foundational element of our understanding. So, think about the out-of-Africa model as an important first layer in explaining our origins. It captures the broad pattern of where modern humans came from and when they appeared, even if newer discoveries reveal that the interactions among ancient populations were far more intertwined than originally believed. Let's revisit what the Multiregional Continuity Model tries to explain. Instead of proposing a single geographic origin for modern humans, this model argues that Homo sapiens evolved simultaneously in different regions of the Old World. The idea is that ancient populations in Africa, Europe, and Asia were linked by continuous gene flow, allowing modern human traits to spread gradually across continents without one population completely replacing another. Let's look at why some researchers found this model appealing. When they examined regional fossil sequences, they noticed what appeared to be long-term continuity. For example, certain facial or cranial traits seem to persist in East Asian fossils over long stretches of time. This led proponents to argue that these populations didn't disappear. They evolved in place, contributing directly to the modern humans living in those regions today. You might wonder why this matters. It reflects an attempt to explain modern human diversity as the result of deep, regionally rooted ancestry. Multiregionalism relies heavily on the idea of substantial gene flow. Without populations mixing over long periods, regional groups would drift too far apart and eventually become separate species. The model assumes that interactions between distant populations were frequent enough to keep everyone part of the same evolving lineage. However, new genetic evidence complicates this picture. Ancient DNA shows clear African origins for modern humans, along with limited but real interbreeding with archaic groups like Neanderthals and Denisovans. This doesn't align well with the broad, continuous regional evolution proposed by multiregionalism. Still, the model remains valuable historically because it highlights how interconnected ancient populations might have been. So, rather than dismissing it entirely, think of the multi-regional model as a perspective that emphasizes long-term regional continuity, one that helped lay the groundwork for today's more nuanced understanding of human origins. Let's revisit what we've learned from the previous models. The out-of-Africa model highlights a clear African origin for modern humans, while the multi-regional model emphasizes long-term regional continuity and gene flow. The assimilation model brings these ideas together, but with a crucial update. It incorporates the genetic evidence showing that early modern humans didn't simply replace archaic populations, they interacted with them, and in some cases, interbred. Let's look at how this model actually works. According to the assimilation perspective, Homo sapiens evolved in Africa and then dispersed outward, just as the out-of-Africa model proposes. But instead of imagining a sweeping replacement, this model recognizes that when modern humans encountered Neanderthals in Europe or Denisovans in parts of Asia, these groups didn't just vanish, they contributed genetically to the expanding modern human populations. You might wonder why this matters. It shifts our understanding of human evolution from a simple branching tree to a more braided stream, where populations meet, mix, and influence one another. The evidence for assimilation comes directly from ancient DNA. When researchers sequenced the Neanderthal genome, they discovered that people living outside Africa carry between 1 and 4% Neanderthal ancestry. Later, the discovery of Denisovan DNA revealed even more complex patterns, especially in populations of Melanesia and Australia, where Denisovan ancestry is significant. These findings tell us that interbreeding was not a rare, isolated event. It was part of the broader interaction landscape of the late Pleistocene. The fossil record supports this view as well. Early modern human specimens from sites like Peshtera ku Oase show anatomical features that resemble both modern humans and Neanderthals, and genetic analyses confirm a recent Neanderthal ancestor. Think about what this indicates. Contact between these groups was not only frequent but biologically consequential. At the same time, the assimilation model preserves the strong African foundation of our species. The deepest genetic lineages and the earliest anatomically modern fossils still come from Africa. What changes is the recognition that as these populations expanded, they absorbed small but meaningful contributions from the groups they encountered. So when we talk about the assimilation model as the most supported today, we're acknowledging a more dynamic and interconnected picture of human evolution. Modern humans didn't simply spread, they spread into landscapes already inhabited by other hominins, and those encounters left lasting marks on our biology. This perspective helps us understand why all humans share a recent African origin while also carrying traces of ancient admixture. It reminds us that our story is not one of isolation, but of interaction, of populations meeting, exchanging genes, and ultimately shaping the diversity of Homo sapiens today. Let's revisit why the discovery of the Denisovans was so surprising. For decades, Neanderthals were the only well-known archaic humans in Eurasia. Then, from a single finger bone and a few teeth found deep inside Denisova Cave in Siberia, researchers extracted DNA that didn't match either Neanderthals or modern humans. This tiny fragment of bone opened an entirely new chapter in human evolution. Let's look at what makes the Denisovans so important. Even though their fossils are scarce, their genetic legacy is unmistakable. When scientists compared Denisovan DNA with that of living populations, they found that certain groups, especially those in Melanesia, Australia, and parts of East and Southeast Asia, carry significant Denisovan ancestry. You might wonder why this matters. It tells us that modern humans did not simply pass through Eurasia as a uniform wave. Instead, they encountered multiple archaic populations, each adding something to the genetic tapestry of people alive today. Denisovan ancestry isn't just a historical footprint. Some of these inherited genes help with real-world adaptations. A well-known example involves populations on the Tibetan Plateau, where a Denisovan-derived gene enhances the ability to tolerate low-oxygen environments. This shows that admixture wasn't just incidental, it had meaningful consequences for survival. The Denisovans also highlight how diverse late Pleistocene Eurasia really was. Alongside them were Neanderthals and early modern humans, sometimes overlapping in time and space. The picture we get is not a neat sequence of replacements, but a dynamic landscape of interactions. So, when we talk about Denisovans, we're really talking about the hidden branches of our own history, branches that only became visible through the power of ancient DNA. Their story reminds us that human evolution was far more intricate, interconnected, and regionally varied than earlier models ever suggested. First, let's revisit the three major perspectives on the emergence of modern humans: the out-of-Africa model, the multi-regional model, and the assimilation model. Each sought to explain the same body of evidence: fossils, archaeological remains, and later genetic data, but from different angles. When placed side by side, these models reveal a more coherent and nuanced story than anyone could provide on its own. Taken together, they offer a broader picture of human origins. The out-of-Africa model provides a strong foundation by identifying Africa as the birthplace of anatomically modern humans. Multi-regionalism, in turn, reminds us that ancient populations were not isolated from one another. Long-term interactions could leave regional traces in the fossil record. However, and this point is crucial, neither model alone could fully account for the insights that emerged from ancient DNA. The discovery of Neanderthal and Denisovan ancestry in living human populations made it clear that interaction, not simple replacement or uninterrupted regional evolution, was a defining feature of our past. Human evolution was not a straight line or a single migration event. Instead, it was a dynamic process of branching, reconnecting, and mixing, with populations meeting, exchanging genes, and sometimes diverging again. This is where the assimilation model becomes especially important. It captures both our deep African origins and the genetic contributions of archaic humans encountered as modern humans dispersed. Rather than choosing between African origins or regional continuity, it integrates both, offering the most comprehensive explanation of the fossil and genetic evidence we have today. As we move into the next section on global dispersal, keep this integrated view in mind. Understanding where modern humans came from provides the foundation for understanding how they spread, and how those journeys shape the biological and cultural diversity of Homo sapiens around the world. Thank you for joining this lecture. I'm Dr. Richard Jonathan O. Tadurin. I hope this session deepened your understanding of biological anthropology. Keep exploring what it means to be human. See you soon.